everybody. Welcome to this episode of the Fandom Report. I'm Catherine Mora, and I'm joined again by the lovely and amazing Trista.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Trista. Thank you again for joining us here again. Love having you on, and I'm sure if you're watching us on YouTube, everybody can tell that, of course, we are going to be talking about Daredevil once more. So definitely, spoiler alert for basically everything that has happened in phase 4 so far, just to cover our bases, and I guess spoilers for the whole Daredevil series, because it seems like now people are starting to watch it and catching up on it. So just spoilers all around. But okay, so Trista, because we kind of talked about this before, but like not really face to face, but when you saw Charlie at last officially in the MCU on the big screen, just like tell me all about that.
I know that we had our suspicions about Daredevil coming back. We had like our hopes and dreams about seeing him in the MCU, but something about actually seeing him on screen and like on the big screen, it was such a crazy experience for me. I remember I audibly gasped. I went with my friend and my friend like grabbed my arm because I was in shock, and he knew that I was a big Daredevil fan and that I was really hoping to see Matt Murdock, and I think we were both like absolutely stunned at the fact that he was actually in the movie. And yeah, it was an ethereal experience. I had like an out-of-body experience actually seeing him on screen. It was insane actually being able to see him.
Yeah, like because I went to see it with my mom, and she's also a Daredevil fan, and the moment that he kind of just slams his stick right into frame, I remember it's kind of something similar. I like grabbed my mom's arm. I was like, oh my god, oh my god. And then it was like, I don't know if it was like the same in your theater, but in my theater it's definitely kind of like everybody was kind of holding back from like really cheering until like they showed his face. But it was like as soon as I saw the stick, I was like, no, it's him. There's like no other person it could be. It has to be him. And like Feige wouldn't mess with us that much.
I know. I was waiting for it to be a Ralph Boner situation, and it's some other person with a cane. That would have been horrible. But yeah, when I saw the cane, that's sort of when I knew. And in my theater, people kind of like gasped at the cane, and then the claps started coming. I was lucky. I know a lot of people said that their theaters didn't know who Matt Murdock was and didn't have a reaction to it. But I was lucky that we got some cheers for him, and I was definitely one of those people going crazy in the audience as well.
I mean, because I know we've talked about this before, but like Daredevil was just such an amazing show, and Charlie brought so much to the character. So it's such a relief to see that they're giving him his second shot. And I don't know if you've heard like all the rumors about how he's basically going to be like in every single Disney Plus show from here on out.
Yeah, he seems to be making a lot of cameos in the future. I know we don't know too much about what's happening with Daredevil, but there's certainly a ton of rumors that we're getting him back kind of scattered throughout a lot of other projects.
Yeah, it almost feels like, and I wonder if this is intentional, if he's going to be like the new Phil Coulson almost, where he has his cameos, and then eventually, he gets his own show, which will be hopefully a Daredevil season 4 instead of like or even a soft reboot is fine, but that kind of feels like they acknowledge just like how much love the fans had for him, and especially seeing how there's a revival of interest even with people who hadn't watched Daredevil previously. Like I feel like everybody now in the MCU is like, well, might as well watch the show, and they're falling in love with it and realizing just how good it is.
Yeah, I think that's been so awesome. Like after his cameo in No Way Home, and after a lot of the rumors that we're going to be seeing more of him, the fact that so many people are now being introduced to the show who haven't seen the show before, it has been so wonderful. I know there's been so much love on TikTok, specifically, of people just falling in love with this character, and I'm so excited that like so many more people are now being introduced to him and the show, and that we're going to have an even bigger audience supporting him when we get to see him in the MCU even more.
Yes. And if anything, it's definitely going to help convince Marvel to give him, a bigger role. If they were planning on only
Yes.
doing cameos, to definitely give him like a bigger role in future projects, to give him a season 4 of Daredevil, because we know he loves the character so much, and we love him as that character. So it's a win-win for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Yeah. So, okay, another question. What were your thoughts? Because again, this we kind of discussed it, on like DMs and everything. But when you saw Kingpin in the Hawkeye finale, so definitely, definitely not the Kingpin we're used to from
Yeah.
Daredevil. Tell me what you thought.
I mean, ultimately, I was really excited to see Vincent D'Onofrio come back as Kingpin. I think, like, when it comes to it, even though I have certain criticisms of the character, and I don't know if it's exactly a perfect introduction of Kingpin, I still
Mhm.
really appreciated having him back, and just kind of that in itself was enough for me as like a Daredevil fan. I feel like I'm
Yeah.
feeding on these crumbs of content, like I'm sort of taking whatever I can get.
Yeah.
And so having Vincent D'Onofrio back was amazing. But I do think it's interesting, sort of the differences to his character. I think he's definitely, I know Vincent D'Onofrio has talked about how he's playing the same version of the character that we
Mhm.
had in Daredevil, but I'm convinced more and more, like on rewatching Hawkeye, that this might be some sort of variant, and that they're leading into a soft reboot situation, just
Yeah.
because the Kingpin that we see in Daredevil feels a lot more brutal and sort of
Mhm.
different in his motivations as well, compared to this Kingpin. I don't know if I'm the only one that sort of feels that way. I know that people were criticizing his wardrobe a lot on TikTok. I know that was like the biggest thing that people had a
Oh my
problem
god.
with.
So I was one of those people who was like, what are you, my guy, like, what are you wearing? I did
Yeah.
see that apparently that was a reference to a comic, that he did actually have that outfit on. So I'm like, okay, I can kind of let that slide a little bit now. My thought is that if they are keeping him like supposedly like as the same Kingpin that we know and love from the Netflix show, is that like either he survived the blip and Vanessa didn't, or Vanessa was like, because you can imagine, like, with all the chaos that happened when Thanos initially snapped, like planes were crashing, car accidents and everything. Maybe Vanessa was killed in that manner. So I think like maybe like something just happened to him, like if he had like a mental breakdown, or he was one of the people who like disappeared for 5 years and now is coming back and is like trying to adjust to this new world like everybody else. That's kind of the only way I could see it, as him being the same Kingpin from Netflix. Like something happened to him to kind of like change his perspective or his approach to things. Another thing is like also just writing, like the ratings that they have to have on like Disney Plus shows versus like the mature ratings that they could do for Netflix. I don't know.
Mhm.
He definitely was acting the same way, like his approach to the acting, like he had the same tone of voice, like he like there was one point where his whole face was like twitching after his talk with
Yes.
Eleanor. I was like,
Hmm.
oh yeah, that's him, that's Kingpin, that's like the guy. But
Uh-huh.
then, of course, obviously he can't like beat Kate Bishop up to a pulp. Like that wouldn't
Yeah.
really play well with like the Disney Plus rating requirements or whatever they're called. So I don't know, I think there's for room for him to become more of like the Kingpin that we know. Um, I think also with Hawkeye being as lighthearted as it was, it might not have been the best project to introduce him in. Something, because as far as like Disney Plus shows go, I would say like probably the Falcon and the Winter Soldier is like the most gritty
Hmm.
out of them all. So maybe a show like that might have been like a better way to like bring him in. But
Yeah.
same as like you were saying, I'm really just happy that he's here. I'll take what I can get at this point.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right that they could play it off as the same Kingpin even after Hawkeye. If they kind of go into the backstory with what happened with the blip, I think that's
Mhm.
going to be a huge part of, the whole storytelling with Kingpin. We need to know what happened with Vanessa, who got blipped, and what specifically went down, because he does seem a little bit different. And we left off with him in season 3, going back to prison. So I also want to know what happened with that and why he's out and about and running business again. And so I think they have the opportunity to kind of like, if there were certain problems with the Hawkeye show, that they can kind of go back and repair by exploring more of his past with the blip and everything. I think that could work out.
No, definitely. And, Marvel has shown us that they're capable of doing stuff like that, like how they kind of repaired the whole absence of the Natasha and Clint friendship through Hawkeye. It would be easy enough for them to go back and do that for Kingpin. What I'm really curious about though is I just really want to know what happened to these characters when Thanos snapped. Like, who was blipped, who was left behind. Like, and hopefully that is something that is addressed in a future show if Matt Murdock is a cameo or like a kind of like a recurring cast member, or in a Daredevil season 4, like it, because like you were saying, it really does, it would tell us so much about how these characters basically have gotten to the point that they are now, if they're doing a soft reboot, or if they are going to be the consistent same characters from Netflix. It's going to tell us a lot about, if Marvel has to make any changes to the personalities just because of copyright reason or the ratings or whatever. The blip, and that's a good thing too, like the blip just makes it so easy for them to kind of deal with that. It's like a kind of a get out of jail free card for them. I don't know if you feel the same way.
Yeah, I definitely feel the same way. And I've been thinking a lot about how the blip kind of would change these characters and how Marvel could use the blip to their advantage depending on whether or not they want to do a soft reboot. That's why I talked a little bit about this on TikTok, that I think all of the main characters like Foggy, Karen, and Matt, I think they all got blipped because I think that gives Marvel kind of an opportunity to just plot them back into the story, just because a lot of character motivations would be changed around if like one of them got left behind, and then it would sort of change the dynamic between the characters. And I think if they want to give a fresh start, they're going to say that the main cast got blipped and Kingpin didn't, and that's sort of why he's back. And I think it would just be so interesting, even aside from how it helps in storytelling about whether or not they're doing a reboot. I think it would just be so interesting to see how the blip affected these characters, because in the Netflix show, we didn't get to see a lot of direct impact from the MCU onto the Netflix shows in the same way that the Netflix shows impacted each other. Like we saw the Battle of New York kind of impact them all from the start, and that's where the story sort of began. But we didn't see the greater MCU tie into these shows. So seeing them actually be impacted by the blip would be really crazy, and I think solidify that hopefully if they want to canonize these shows and kind of bring in that same iteration of these characters and just give them a soft start in a way with the blip, I think it would be the perfect way to do it.
Definitely. It's because let me try to get my thoughts in order before I continue. It's something that I feel, besides like with Monica in WandaVision, like very briefly, the blip and how it impacts the people who like vanished versus the people who didn't, I feel like hasn't really been explored that much, like on a personal level, like deep dive, like, well, to be fair, like the Flag Smashers, that was also like a thing for them, that their lives were impacted when everybody came back. But for people who disappeared and missed those 5 years, that hasn't really been touched on too much. And it would be great, especially with characters as grounded as the Daredevil cast, to see kind of like their day-to-day, like, okay, if all of them, if Matt, Foggy, and Karen all just appeared, that means they kind of have to start their business up from scratch. Like, how much of time passed between the end of season 3 versus Infinity War? Like, where were they at that point in their lives? And if some of them stayed behind, but some of them were blipped, like, for example, like if Foggy was the only one who like survived, like did he go back to working for like a big firm again? Like, what happened with him and Marcy? Just things like that. It's seeing people kind of adjusting in their lives after coming back from the blip is something that Marvel really should touch on a little more, just because like the blip was such a big deal and has affected the story. Like we saw with the Eternals, like that was something that really motivated, was like kind of like the whole reasoning like behind the movie The Eternals.
Mhm.
And it would also kind of give because I saw this was like a thing that I've been seeing on Twitter, people saying like from now on, all these new heroes kind of have to explain like why they didn't help fight against Thanos.
Mhm.
And it's like, okay, well, if you have somebody like Daredevil, the Defenders who were gone and then came back, then that's kind of like, okay, that's we get it. That's why they didn't show up. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like that's definitely it's an easy route to take, but it also would open up the room, like open up room for so much character development.
I think so too. And I totally agree with like I think it's especially great to see ground level stories like the stories that we see in Daredevil and those characters dealing with the blip, just because I want to see how the majority of the world is dealing with the blip. I know that we get to see kind of bigger characters deal with the blip. But I think seeing it on small scale and seeing like I'm assuming Daredevil might show how it affected Hell's Kitchen.
Yeah.
I would love to see stuff like that and see a lot of like a lot more explanation and a lot more exploration of just like how it impacted the little guy, I guess. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think Daredevil would be it would be great to show those characters and how it changes even just their everyday lives. Like you were saying with how Foggy's life would change, or like how he would go back to work at a bigger firm, or his relationship with Marcy, like seeing those smaller changes in people's individual lives would be great.
Yeah. Yeah. So something that you just said triggered it's going to be a little bit of a change of topic, but because when you said like, seeing how it affects the little guy immediately made me think of Spider-Man. And
Mhm.
I remember we were talking about how like if Matt appeared in No Way Home, meeting Spider-Man, meeting Peter, that could kind of be like a connection for him to eventually like interact with the Avengers in the future. But
Mhm.
as we saw at the end of No Way Home, nobody knows who Peter Parker is anymore. So I think it's safe to say like Matt's kind of safe, quote unquote safe from like bigger cosmic level stuff with the Avengers in the future. But I
Mhm.
think it would be really interesting because it seems like Spider-Man is also kind of like back to being a ground level hero now, to
Yeah.
see them interacting again in the future
Mhm.
in some capacity.
I do. I have to say, there were a lot of like sad realizations I came to after No Way Home, like thinking of who doesn't remember who Peter is. But
Mm-hmm.
admittedly, one of the saddest realizations I came to is that Matt doesn't remember Peter, and
Mm-hmm.
I really love them, their like duo in the comics. I love seeing them interact with each other, and that was something I was really looking forward to if we did get Matt in No Way Home. Like, oh, this opens up the future for like Daredevil and Spider-Man crossing over. So now that he doesn't know who Peter is, I'm like, oh, maybe we're not going to see that as soon as I hoped. But I do think since Spider-Man is more ground level like Daredevil, and since he's still operating in New York, we can see this duo kind of come together, and it would probably work a little bit differently since Matt has to kind of be reintroduced to Peter, not knowing who he is and everything.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's definitely something that can still be explored. And so I am, as much as I'm really, really sad about what happened in No Way Home, I'm happy that it does open things up to like more ground level heroes working together and kind of seeing hopefully Spider-Man and Daredevil crossover.
Yeah, realizing that Matt no longer knew not only who Peter Parker is, but that Spider-Man is Peter Parker. That did hurt a lot. I know we talked about
Mhm.
like it'd be really cool to see some sort of like mentoring thing. Like it would be a way to kind of give Spider-Man more like options in terms of like with teaming up with superheroes. Like he doesn't just have to be like with the Avengers. He can it would like connect him more to New York than he's been so far. And
Mhm.
I agree though, like it's still because, the last time we saw Spider-Man in No Way Home, he's swinging through Manhattan of all places. He's like around Midtown. So in Midtown's not that far from Hell's Kitchen. So there's definitely the opportunity there for them to meet up again and team up. It would be interesting to see because Peter, even though he knows who Matt is, he doesn't know that Matt is Daredevil. He knows that there's like
Yeah.
something weird about him because of with him catching the brick, which also that scene of him catching the brick is just
Was
chef's kiss.
amazing.
It's
Yeah.
so good. It's so good. Like, and him, I'm a really good lawyer. Like, yes, you are, and I love
Oh,
you.
it
It's
was
so
so
good.
iconic.
It really was. Like, it's so good. So good. I love him so much. But so Peter knows that there's like something about Matt, but I don't think he knows enough to like put two and two together and think, oh yeah, obviously he's Daredevil. Like I don't think that's gonna happen. So it would be
Mhm.
interesting for him to meet Daredevil, like as Spider-Man, meet Daredevil first, not realizing that
Yeah.
it's Matt, and then somewhere down the line, like coming to the realization, like, oh, you're the lawyer. But then it'll be funny too, I think, because like Matt's not gonna know who this kid is. I
I
just
do think it
like,
could be so fun.
yeah. No, go ahead. Sorry, what were you gonna say? I
Oh
think I
no,
cut
I
you
was
off.
just totally agreeing that that would be so funny. Like Peter kind of already knows who this guy is. Like once he figures out his identity, and Matt still has no clue who Peter is. And I just think that interaction could be really funny.
Yes. Like even if it's like a thing where Peter is like starting to have suspicions because obviously he knows more about Matt than Matt would know about Peter. Um, it'd be just kind of funny. And like it would be also like a little bit of a callback to No Way Home if he just like throws something at Matt's head, like while Matt is not Daredevil.
Oh my gosh, yes.
But then the question is, would Matt like out of instinct like catch it, or would he kind of just like
Let it
train himself
happen.
and let it?
So he doesn't blow his cover.
Yes.
Mhm. That would be, it would sort of be like the whole MJ throwing bread at Andrew
Yes.
Spider-Man, except
Yes.
with Matt and Peter. I think that would be hilarious.
I just want all of the interactions between them. I think that they're two characters who would play off of each other just so well.
Hmm.
Um, and it's interesting too because yes, in No Way Home it does leave Peter in like a darker place, but he's still like Tom Holland's Peter Parker is still like very, I don't, happy is not the right word, energetic, I guess,
Hmm.
as opposed to like, Matt's more like grounded, grittier, like his whole aesthetic is like very grounded and gritty, whereas
Yeah.
Spider-Man is definitely more optimistic overall, like despite the very sad ending of No Way Home. And I
Hmm.
still can see like how they can just mesh together so well.
I think so too. I think especially with Tom's Spider-Man being the way he is and being like really optimistic and lighthearted, like despite everything that he's going through, still having that very like kind of like quirky and upbeat attitude compared to
Mhm.
Matt being so stoic and like just everything about Matt being generally more depressing and serious
Mhm.
as a person. I think it would add to the dynamic and make it even funnier to have them contrasting each other like that.
Yeah, no, definitely. And just thinking about, I at this point, I feel like I'm kind of, it's more wishful thinking, but also seeing Peter interacting with like Foggy and Karen
Oh
as
my
well.
gosh, yes. Peter and Foggy, I think would be a hilarious duo. That would
Yes.
be, they would be cracking jokes left and right. I'm sure Matt would be a little bit annoyed by it. Karen would
Mhm.
be totally into it. It would be really
Yes.
funny.
I feel like, do you feel this too? Like that Foggy would be like a huge Spider-Man fan?
Oh yeah,
Yes.
definitely. I think he's
Yes.
got like a Spider-Man poster in his room. Like he's
Yes.
a huge Spidey fan. I bet he was like advocating for Spider-Man during the whole Mysterio crisis.
Mhm.
I think Foggy was probably going around and talking about how Spider-Man's a hero. I think especially because like how his attitude towards vigilantes changed when he found out about Matt and being
Yeah.
Daredevil. And I think he sort of grew to understand Matt's motivations. And so now he sort of gets the whole superhero lifestyle. And I think
Mhm.
he loves Spider-Man. Definitely.
Yeah.
That's my headcanon.
No, I totally agree. And I also think because when Matt first shows up in No Way Home, he's on the phone and I'm like, he's 100% talking to
Talking
Foggy
to
on the other
Foggy.
end. Like
That's what
Foggy
I
was
was
like,
thinking too.
he's like talking to like the prosecutor or the district attorney or whatever and telling Matt the good news, like, oh, they're not going to press charges against Peter. And Matt was there. And so he told them. But it would have been really cool to see like almost like what happened in the Defenders, where Matt comes into the interrogation room where Jessica Jones is being questioned. It would have been really awesome to see like Matt and or Foggy like enter and kind of like interrupt that whole thing that was happening.
Hmm.
But again, beggars can't be choosers. I'm happy for what we got.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, Foggy and Peter is definitely an interaction that I hope we get to see in the future.
Me too. Yeah.
Yeah. because it's just, I mean, I won't lie, I've been like consuming whatever fanfic that I can find about this group, like
Mhm.
ever since No Way Home came out. But you know, we'll see what happens. I doubt we're gonna get anything in 2022 in terms of like Daredevil season 4, but
Yeah.
if you know Charlie is gonna have a cameo in She-Hulk, hopefully you'll see not just Matt but also Foggy, both of them, because they are both lawyers and they're partners. So hopefully if there's like a courtroom scene, it'll be, you know, Nelson and Murdock again.
Mhm.
Who knows? So what if you could have like any, I don't know, any like opening scene for a season 4 of Daredevil, or like any like major storyline that you would want to have explored for season 4, like what would it be?
I think if we had a season 4, I would almost want to see right where we left off. I know that's not really typical in like going from season to season, like usually
Mhm.
it's not a direct continuation, but I like to think in my mind that like the blip happens in 2018, which is when Daredevil ends in real life, season 3. And
Mhm.
so I sort of think in my head that like the reason that we didn't get more Daredevil is because the blip took out those characters. So I sort of want to see, I really want to see where the blip happens, if it is at the end of season 3. And
Mhm.
if not, then I want to start with like what happened to these characters during the blip. But as an overall storyline, I would really love to see Dex come back as Bullseye,
Yes.
because we sort of got a taste of his character. We didn't ever get to see him as Bullseye, but we
Mhm.
got a taste of his character and his background and his motivations. And we were sort of left with that cliffhanger at the end of season 3, where we see Dex being operated on. And I really want to see what's next for that character. But I wonder if we're ever going to see that if they do something like a soft reboot, because you would probably need the background of Dex's character. You'd have to sort of watch the Netflix shows and understand his character before they introduce him. So
Yeah.
I'm nervous that it might not be something that they do, but I really, really want them to. I think the actor that plays Dex is great. I think he's such a horrifying villain, and he does an amazing job at playing Bullseye. And I mean, just being a comics fan, Bullseye is kind of one of Daredevil's biggest foes. So actually seeing him on screen would be amazing. And it's just something I really, really want to see. And I'm hoping that they do it at some point.
I agree. I That's definitely, and if anything, because yeah, it's true. It would be tricky just because like we don't know like all the legalities with like the copyrights like you know Netflix versus Disney Plus, if that's like something that they can like really pick and choose from, like if they can actually like be like, oh, you know, just watch those shows first, then come to us. I don't know. But Dex, I agree. Like I feel like his story was just starting, like
Yeah.
especially how things ended in season 3. Like he would definitely want revenge on not just Daredevil but also, you know, Kingpin. And I feel like that would
Mhm.
be a great like enemy triangle going on,
Yes.
because that last fight scene between the three of them, like it's like, who do I
Amazing.
focus on? Like we're all just like out here trying to kill each other. Not really, some of them yes, but not Daredevil. Like when Matt jumps from like fighting Kingpin to like defending Vanessa from Dex, is like just like things like that. It's just seeing that playing out in like a longer term like battle of like the minds and physical as well would just be utterly amazing. I
Yes.
actually forgot that season 3 ended in 2018. So as soon as you said that, my first thought was like the very opening of season 4 would be kind of like them like a reshoot of that scene of them, you know, with the napkin. And then
Mhm.
immediately after, like people start like turning into dust.
Yes, that's what I want to see so badly.
And the thing is, they could like, I'm just imagining like how horrifying it would be for Matt if he's like not one of the first people to go or one of the people to go at all.
Oh my gosh, I've been thinking
Like,
about this.
because like he would hear it in a way we
Hmm.
can't. He would like smell it and like almost taste it too, probably. Like,
Hmm.
and then it would also be interesting if he's like not one of the people who disappears. Because I've always wondered about this, and I don't know if I appreciate Marvel not touching this or if I want them to do it, but I always wondered like if there were any religious groups who were like claiming that this was like the second coming or
Mhm.
something like that, and seeing how that would like play with Matt's Catholicism.
Yeah.
I think that's like a really big opportunity there. Like I almost, it talking about this now almost makes me wish that Matt doesn't get blipped, and like the first episode is just like covering like the 5 years where it's him and like Baki's gone, Karen's gone, like pretty much everybody's gone. Like I don't know, I it would also be really cool just like if all of them are gone, if Matt's like the last one to go, and then
Mhm.
coming back almost like how they did with Yelena, that she like comes back almost immediately in her mind, and then like all the chaos that's happening around them when people are suddenly returning.
Yeah. I don't know. I think you do bring up a good point. Like, it would be so interesting to see what would happen if Matt was the one who stayed behind. And I think it would echo the tone a lot of season 3, and kind of seeing Matt, what he's like when he's isolated and alone and having to deal with that. And I think seeing, how he deals with his religion and his Catholicism throughout this whole throughout the blip, I think it would be really amazing to see. And I think people on TikTok keep bringing up how sad it would be. They're talking about like his radar sense, and like you
Mhm.
said, like how he would feel things differently compared to other people. Like he would experience it, he would be hearing things.
Yeah.
Someone said he would hear like half the heartbeats in Hell's Kitchen disappear, and I was like, oh, I did not need to think about
Yeah.
that. That totally destroyed my heart.
Like he would probably hear, because you got to think about like his senses, he experiences the world differently than we do, and we kind of get like an idea of it like when he tells people like how he knows like what they ate, or how he can like hear people, what they're doing, what they're feeling like on a different floor, whatever. He would probably hear like everybody's people who are getting dusted, like their body turning to ash. Like he would hear
Yeah,
them dissolving and everything. And if it's happening to people that he loves and cares about, like the
that's
horror,
horrifying.
like
Yeah,
ooh, yeah, oh
that's
god,
really, really
that's
sad.
it's sad. And you brought up a good point, how it would definitely reflect, if he's the one who survives, it would reflect like his journey in season 3. And if Marvel were to do like a soft reboot, that could also work for them, because
Hmm.
then he goes through that journey again
Yeah.
without them really having to rely so much on what happened in season 3 for that. I don't know, food for thought.
So it could work. Yeah.
Yeah, is yeah. Marvel, we need to know. We need to know what
I'm like
happened.
so anxious to know. I'm gonna be really disappointed. Like, I'm gonna be happy no matter what they do, but
Mhm.
I admit I'm gonna be disappointed if we don't ever find out what happened during the blip with these characters. Only because I have so many questions and I'm so curious to see what happened.
Yeah, hopefully we do get something, jet if only to like kind of, especially if it's like a soft reboot, so that way they can kind of give some backstory without having to rely too much on like the Netflix backstories. Gives
Hmm.
them a little padding to work with those 5 years. But yeah, I agree, like we're gonna be happy that we're getting content, but I think regardless of what happens, there's gonna be a little part of us that's so disappointed about something, which that's what happens when you reboot a series.
Yeah.
But it is what it is. He's here, he's canon. It's not a Ralph Boner situation. I'll take it.
Thankfully. Yeah, me too.
Thankfully, because Ralph Boner, that I'm still, it's almost
I'm
a
not
year
over it.
later. I'm not over it.
Yeah, me
I'm just
neither.
it's like because somebody was I forget like what the context of the conversation was, but somebody was commenting on one of my Daredevil posts, and they were saying like, oh, I don't think it's like that big of a deal that they like didn't recast Vincent D'Onofrio. Like I think it would have been fine either way. Thinking like, can you imagine the outrage if
Oh
they're
my
like, oh
gosh.
yeah, Vincent D'Onofrio is coming back, but he's like actually like Richard whatever, like he's not Wilson Fisk, he's like and it's like, oh, but you can call me Dick or something like that.
There would have been outrage. That
Yeah,
would have been, oh my gosh. Just
like
imagining it. No, it would have
it
been
would have hurt
horrible.
so much.
Mhm.
It would have like, it's him but he's not Wilson Fisk. No, 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 no,
Daredevil fans, we've suffered enough,
no.
like when the show got canceled and trying to get it back and trying to get a season 4. If they were to tease us like that, it would just be cruel at that point.
It would, it really would. And
Mhm.
and it's almost, because if the show ended 2018, we're coming on 4 years.
Oh
four
wow,
years
yeah.
this year without any new Daredevil content. Like, we got him a little bit in No Way Home. We got Vincent D'Onofrio in Hawkeye, but actual like the Daredevil series, almost 4 years. And I'm like, what you said earlier, if they were all gone for 5 years, it would be so cool and a little meta if they did like a season 4 in 2023, like when the snap happens in the MCU timeline, because then it's kind of like, oh, they're back. Like
Hmm.
it's been 5 years, they were gone, it's because of the blip. It's it's a thing, and now they're back. That'd be a little meta, and the sooner the better, in my opinion. But I'll take 2023.
Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely, like, if Hawkeye is any indication of like their approach for writing, it definitely will be a different Daredevil. I'm still hopeful that they'll like introduce this, like the thing that they have in the UK that's like Star,
Yeah.
that it can be like rated R content. I'm still hopeful that they'll introduce that into like the US Disney Plus at some point, so that they can do Daredevil the way it was intended to be written. But I don't know. I will admit I am a little scared about how it's going to turn out, because at the end of the day, like, we'll be happy that we get some new content, but if it's not what we fell in love with, like, will it ruin the show for us overall? Like, can we kind of just ignore that? It's hard if you're an MCU fan, because with everything connecting, you kind of have to watch everything.
Yeah.
So it's like, these are my characters, but they're not the characters I fell in love with. I have to
Mhm.
suffer through this. Like, I don't know. It would almost, and again, it depends like how much they're not like their characters. If it's like Vincent D'Onofrio and Hawkeye, where he's saying that he's playing the same guy, but it doesn't really feel like him. It was a little hard for me to watch him like as the episode progressed, because I'm like, this feels almost like a parody.
Yeah. That's a good way
And
to put it.
yeah, it just kind of felt like, from the wardrobe choice to like his line about Goldman Sachs, like quitting her job, like she works in Goldman Sachs. I was like, that that's not something you would say. Like, that
Mhm.
does not feel like something you would say. And it's like, okay, I don't know if this is just you guys adapting him to work in the MCU, or if it's you guys kind of doing like a more subtle Ralph Boner thing towards us, like kind of mocking like the Daredevil fans a little bit. I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't know. I hope not.
Yeah, I think I definitely I have a lot of concern for Daredevil because, like you said, we fell in love with like the characters that we were given in the Marvel Netflix show. And I do worry if they're not adapted quite faithfully, and if they're sort of changed in ways that aren't really beneficial to the character.
Mhm.
I do worry, especially with, if we don't see these characters in a mature rated TV show or rated R or however they would rate it. Like if it was made a lot more PG and then they're making a lot of changes to the character, I do wonder like how it would make me feel as a Daredevil fan, because I am so attached to the way the characters were originally written and the way the show originally played out. So I think I am skeptical, but I'm going in with high hopes.
Mhm.
But I do definitely have my concerns, and I do worry about what's going to happen, just because this show is like so near and dear to my heart.
Yeah. No, I agree. Ooh, okay. Here's a question for you. If you had to choose,
Mhm.
Daredevil season 4 happens and it has a similar writing to Netflix, but everybody except Charlie and Vincent has been recast. Or keeping the
Gosh,
whole cast but having a more like Disney Plus writing approach, what would you prefer?
this is a hard question.
I know, I
Oh my
know.
gosh. So it would be everyone except Charlie and Vincent
They
are
keep
recast.
Charlie and Vincent but recast everybody else, and they
Oh my
keep the writing
gosh.
style of the Netflix show. Or they keep everybody, the whole cast, they get to stay, but the writing style fits more of like the MCU as it is now.
Oh my gosh. I think this is the hardest question I've ever been asked, because I think, oh my gosh. I really, really want Daredevil as it was continued on. Like season 4, that is the optimal situation, getting to see these characters and getting it written well and, thematically matching the Netflix tone. But I think the cast was done so perfectly. Like I think without Karen and Foggy being the same, I don't know if it would feel right. I think I might be willing to sacrifice season 4 to get the whole cast, just because it would feel so, it would almost feel wrong having different actors play those characters, because in my mind, like they fit so well with the characters. And that's who I see, like that's Foggy Nelson, that's Karen Page, and they can't really be replaced. And I think their chemistry with Charlie Cox is already so amazing that I don't know if anyone else could play it off with him as well as they do. So I think my answer is I would go with Disney Plus and the same cast, just because I fell in love with this cast and they really are so perfect. And I guess this is the situation that we're sort of in now with Disney Plus taking on these characters. I think that even if it's written in a very PG way, very, lighthearted comedy action MCU style, I think that I can find some redemption in it from the actors just being so great at playing their roles. And I think maybe just seeing them again could be enough, at least a little bit. I think it would be worth it.
Yeah. I'm
That's a hard question.
It's a hard question, and I'm still not even sure what my answer is. It came to mind. I was like, I don't know the answer. Let me ask Trista what she thinks, because it's a really hard question. I do agree though that the chemistry of the cast is like part of what makes the show like so great. And I think whatever script you give them, that chemistry it's not going to go away. The script isn't going to impact that. So they can still play off of each other really well, even if it is, different writing. And, we also know that Marvel can tell a really good story. It's not like they don't know what they know what they're doing. So while it would be weird and would take some like getting used to, I think I'd probably go with your answer as well, keeping the cast, but like Disney Plus writing instead of like replacing everybody. Because even if you replace everybody, you don't know if those replacements are going to fit the characters and the dynamics that already exist as well. So I think keeping the whole cast is probably the way to go. That's a hard one.
Yeah, that was a really good question. It gave me a little bit of a crisis there.
I saw like when I said it, your eyes just kind of went like, oh God.
Yeah. I like felt a physical reaction to that question. I like was in shock, I think.
Okay, everyone. Well, that's it for this episode of the Phantom Report. Thank you guys so much for joining. Trista, is there any last comments, thoughts, anything you want to share with us before we sign off?
I think I'm looking forward to seeing more Daredevil. I mean, we've got Charlie Cox in the MCU finally. We've got Vincent D'Onofrio, and I think things are looking good for us. I think we can be skeptical, but I think ultimately, we should be hopeful for the future of Daredevil.
I agree. And seeing the fandom for Daredevil grow will also definitely create a better experience. And, we're all gonna get to experience the character, whatever direction Marvel takes them in together, which I think will be a lot of fun to see, especially seeing how the Marvel fandom has grown over the last few years. So I agree, lots to look forward to. So you guys, if you're not watching Daredevil yet, probably shouldn't have watched this video because there were a lot of spoilers.
Yeah, I was gonna say
lots of spoilers. But hopefully we convinced you to watch it, because it is a very, very good movie.
Amazing.
Show. I'm sorry. It's a very good show. Because the movie was kind of not amazing.
No, oh gosh. That's a podcast for a whole nother day.
That's a whole other episode. But you guys, if you're in the process of watching Daredevil, but you haven't watched Daredevil yet, get through it. It is so good. You won't regret it. And you'll be able to understand more of what we were talking about in this episode. But if you guys aren't following Trista on TikTok or on Instagram, you're definitely missing out, because she does amazing Daredevil content. I'm always cracking up every time.
Thank
Every time I
you.
see what you do, she understands, and as you can tell by this episode, she understands that character so well. So definitely give her a follow for more Daredevil content. And we will see you guys all in the next podcast episode. Thanks for tuning in. Thank you, Trista, again for joining.
Thank you for
And
having me.
no, absolutely. Anytime. You are welcome on this show anytime. All right, guys. Thank you again, and see you soon. Bye.
Bye.